There is a game, and you already know which one I mean, that didn't just entertain you. It did something else. Something harder to explain. Maybe it was the first time a story in a game made you feel something real. Maybe it was the moment you realized that this medium could be more than just pushing buttons. Maybe it was simply the right game at the right moment in your life. And because of that, it got in deep. Deeper than a game probably should. We all have one. I don't care how many thousands of hours you've put into gaming over the decades. There is one game that sits differently from all the others. One game you could describe in detail right now, decades later, without needing to look anything up. One game that, if someone mentions the title at a dinner table, still makes something light up inside you. Today, I want to talk about why those games exist, why certain games reach us in ways that others never do. And I want to hear yours, because I genuinely believe the stories in the comments of this video are going to be some of the best things on the internet today. Let's get into it. For me, it was The Legend of Zelda, the original, 1986. I was 11 years old. My older cousin had a NES and he let me sit with him one afternoon while he played. I watched him walk out of that first cave holding a wooden sword, and I felt something shift in my chest that I couldn't name at the time. It wasn't just excitement. It was something closer to recognition. Like, oh, this is a place. This is a world. And I can go into it. I didn't sleep properly for 2 weeks after I got my own copy. Not because it was keeping me up. Well, not only because of that, but because I couldn't stop thinking about it when I closed my eyes. The map, the dungeons, the feeling of being genuinely lost in a world that had no interest in holding my hand or telling me where to go next. There was no internet to look things up. There was no walkthrough. There was just the game and me, and the absolute certainty that somewhere in that world there was a next step, and I was going to find it. I found things in that game that I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for them. A sense of agency, a sense that my choices mattered, a sense that the world was bigger than what I could immediately see, and that exploration, real, uncertain, unrewarded exploration, was worth doing for its own sake. I've carried that feeling my entire life, and I genuinely don't think I would have if that game hadn't put it there first. So why does this happen? Why do some games become part of us, while others, games we may have spent just as many hours with, fade almost completely? I've thought about this a lot, and I think it comes down to 3 things. The first is timing. The games that change us almost always arrive at a moment when we're ready to be changed. Adolescence, a period of loneliness, a time of transition, a summer with nothing to do, and a mind that needed somewhere to go. The game doesn't create the opening. Life creates the opening. The game just walks through it. The second is agency. The games that stay with us are almost always the ones where we felt genuinely in control of something. Not just pressing the right button at the right time, but making real decisions with real consequences in a world that responded to us as if we mattered. That feeling of mattering, especially for kids and teenagers who often feel like they have no say in anything, is extraordinarily powerful. And once a game gives it to you, you never quite forget it. The third, and this one is perhaps the most important, is discovery. Not the kind of discovery that modern games hand you on a schedule. Not the waypoint that appears the moment you need it, pointing you toward the next thing you're supposed to find. real discovery. The kind where you genuinely didn't know that room was there. Where you stumbled onto a secret because you were curious, rather than because the game told you to go and look. That kind of discovery does something to the brain that's almost impossible to replicate. It creates a memory that isn't just, "I found a thing." It's I specifically, with my specific curiosity, found something that I wasn't supposed to find yet. It becomes part of your story. And games that give you that, games that trust you enough to let you get genuinely lost, tend to stay with you in a way that curated experiences never quite do. Here's something that doesn't get said often enough about the games that changed us. They taught us things, real things, things that carried. I know that sounds like the kind of thing people say to justify a hobby to someone who doesn't understand it. But I mean it literally. The games that shaped my generation taught us how to read a map. A real map, with no GPS marker telling us where we were. They taught us to be methodical, because a dungeon that defeated you once would defeat you again unless you changed your approach. They taught us patience, in a way that almost nothing else in childhood required patience, because the game didn't care how frustrated you were. It would sit there, completely unmoved, until you figured it out. They taught us that failure is not the end, that you could die, again and again and again, and simply try once more, that the only real loss was walking away. How many of us carry that lesson out of gaming and into something harder? A career, a relationship, a health crisis, a moment where everything was telling us to stop trying, and we didn't, because somewhere in the back of our minds was the muscle memory of a child who refused to let a cartridge beat them. And perhaps most importantly, they taught us that other worlds are real, not literally, but emotionally, imaginatively. They trained our minds to step fully into a place that didn't exist and care about what happened there, as if it did. That capacity, to inhabit another perspective, to feel invested in a world you know is fiction, is not a small thing. It's the same capacity that makes us better readers, better listeners, better at understanding people whose lives look nothing like ours. We were building something in those hours. We just didn't have the language for it at the time. I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying every game from our era was profound. Most of them weren't. There were games I loved deeply that were, if I'm honest, not very good. Games I remember fondly because of who I was playing with, or where I was in my life, rather than because the game itself had anything particularly special to offer. Nostalgia is a powerful editor. It keeps the warmth and removes the frustration, the repetition, the hours lost to mechanics that simply didn't work. And there were games that I could see were trying to be the kind of game that changes you, that had all the ingredients, but for whatever reason, didn't quite land for me personally. Maybe I played them at the wrong age. Maybe I played them too briefly. Maybe someone else's life-changing game is sitting on a shelf in my memory labeled pretty good, and that's fine. That's how it works. These things are personal. The game that changes you is the game that meets you exactly where you are. And nobody else is ever standing in quite the same place. So, we've talked about timing, and agency, and discovery. We've talked about what games taught us without us realizing we were being taught anything. We've talked about the ones that almost got there, and the ones that truly did. Now I want to hear yours. What was the game? Not just the title. I want to know the story around it. How old were you? Where were you playing it? Was there someone else in the room? Or were you completely alone? What did it give you that nothing else had given you before? Because here's what I've learned from doing this. The comments on a question like this aren't just comments. They're a record, a document of what this hobby has meant to a generation of people who were told over and over again that it didn't mean anything at all. It meant something. You know it did. And your story deserves to be written down somewhere. Write it below. I'll be reading every single one. And if your story moves me, and I have a feeling a lot of them will, I'll be replying. See you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.